And we are live for a little bit. This one is not going to be terribly long. I am during my hopefully last work trip for the year. I am in Dallas in a hotel room, and this particular hotel historically has pretty decent internet speed. So I figured I'm going to do a quick live stream to talk about one of the fairly interesting rifle scopes that I've been messing with lately, and that's the GPO Centuri 4X compact, 4 to 16 by 44 illuminated. By the way, I see that there are a couple of people here, as is always the case. If you are watching this live, please put something in the chat box. Tell me that you can hear me. I have a long history of microphone problems. If you're not familiar with the little GPO, here are some pictures. Since I am traveling, okay, Mr. Alpine is here. Sounds good. Thanks, sir. Since I am traveling, I obviously don't have the scope with me. I didn't want to fly with it. It's at home on the rifle. And to give you an idea, this thing is tiny. Here it is on an AR-15. This is a 224 Valkyrie AR-15 with what's it, 22, 24-inch barrel, something like that. You can kind of see that this is not a big scope, and its overall length is just a hair shorter than 10 inches. It just goes from 4 to 16 power, 44 millimeter objective, illuminated reticle, etc. Rob, is the reloading room is here. Wonderful. So you can hear me on YouTube, you can hear me on locals. I'll take it. Okay. So for a closer look, that should give you a better idea. Excellent. So this is not a final review yet. I've spent a little bit of time with the scope, and I've kind of been moving in between rifles, trying to figure out where it is at its best. Mr. Cunt Bucket, how late am I? No, I just started. This one is later than usual. I'm in Dallas for a Christmas holiday, early Christmas holiday party with the office. So the way, for those of you who don't know, the way my life is, my day job is structured. I live in Albuquerque. I live in New Mexico, but the company I work for is in Dallas. So I run, for my day job, I run a subsidiary of a small Israeli company that does all sorts of electro-optical test equipment, like rifle scope testers, for example, and several other things. So I fly over to Dallas once a month or so, and today we had our early holiday party, which amounts to, not a small office, there's not a lot of us, to us heading over to a nice steakhouse, in this case, Knife, and enjoying a nice meal in the company of people we generally like. One of the nice things about running a small company is that I can pick my employees, and I like the people I work with. It's a pretty good thing. So I had a nice aged 32-ounce ribeye that was quite good, probably not as good as the price tag would suggest, but it was thoroughly enjoyable. And since I've got an hour or so before I'm going to crash and go to sleep, I figured I'll pop onto a live stream and talk a little bit about this optic that Mr. Cuntbucket has apparently been waiting for a while. Again, this is more of a first look. It's not a final review. Before I do anything final, I'm going to spend a hell of a lot more time with this thing. But in the meantime, what I tried to do, I did not carefully check tracking when I was sighting in. I looked carefully at how it moved. It looks like tracking is good. I will examine it more carefully. When I first get the scope, I basically try it on a few different rifles, run the turrets around, cycle them back and forth and all sort of stuff, move all the controls, and try to kind of get an idea where I think this optic has the best possible fit, and whether I like overall the image through it and stuff like that. So I think it is really at its best on an AR-15, which is where it ended up, for a variety of reasons. But one of them is that when the rifle scope is this short, to get it above the Picatinny rail of any standard length, you need to mount it relatively high. And having a straight stock rifle like an AR-15 or honestly many of the various chassis style bolt guns that we have would make for a nice mounting option. For example, I've tried it other than AR-15. Let me see. I've tried it on the Ruger 1022, and I've tried it on my Tikka T3X. And in both of those, with a fixed stock, I could not really. When I lined up behind the scope, my eye was too far from it. Right, it's a short scope, and not only is it a little bit higher than I'd like typically on this gun because of how the stock is configured, but also I could not get my face quite short enough without really stretching my neck. If I were to hold the gun, the way people do, hunters often do, a little bit from the side, it was okay. But when I line up square behind the gun, kind of like it's shown in the picture with the 1022, I'm just a little bit too far. So I had my nephew, who was at the range with me, take a couple of pictures. So this is me lining up behind with a gun. This is where my eye is naturally ending up without straining my neck and all that. This is where I want my eye to be, and I'm shooting sitting off the bench but leaning forward a little bit, which is kind of a reasonable. It's not my eye's not as far forward as if I was shooting prone, but pretty close. But from this position, I do not see the full sight picture. To get the full sight picture, I basically have to be here. This is on 16 power, and this is on 4 power, where I can be a little bit further out. But in both cases, I pretty much had to strain my neck to get behind the scope. And on the Tikka T3X with the standard factory stock, it was the same exact situation. So at the end, I basically looked at it and said, okay, this scope is at its best on an AR-15 because it makes some of the AR-15 mounting very easy. If you look at it carefully, you see that I've got just split rings, and there's plenty. You don't need cantilevered mount, not like that. There's plenty of space on the top rail to mount this thing. And I can, because of how the AR-15 is configured, I have plenty of latitude in mounting the scope exactly where I need it. Yep. I hope this all makes sense. Is it gonna stay on a Valkyrie? Maybe, maybe not. Probably not at the moment. I'm actually leaning toward putting it onto a 6.5 Grendel that I have, because that one is set up a little bit more as a hunting rifle. And one of the big advantages of a gun as short as this guy is being able to put a thermal clip on in front of it. So what I plan to do is pop this over into the Grendel that has a handguard with a top rail, so that I can set this up with a thermal clip on Wesersteiner C35 Gen 2 that I really like, and continue testing it there. But is this all making sense so far? I'm going to go with a yes. But this was not intended to be a lecture, so feel free to ask questions as we go along. When I first saw this scope at SHOT Show earlier this year, well, almost a year ago, it looked pretty interesting, right? So I like short designs. They have, strengths and weaknesses. There are always compromises involved in doing optics with that are this short. It's not easy, and when you're trying to, bend light at more extreme angles, there are always some compromises. Different companies manage it in different ways, and technology always moves forward. So I was very curious to see what GPO could pull off for what is it? I think it retails for about $600, something like that. There are two versions, MOA and Milleradian. Yes, it's a 4 to 16 by 44. Where was I? Yeah, let me see. I think I had a picture of the eyepiece. There we go. So that should tell you exactly what the scope is in case you're trying to look it up. Okay. The full name is GPO Centuri 4X Compact 4 to 16 by 44. Do I think it would be good on a Tikka T1X 22 long rifle? So it depends on how your Tikka is set up. With a factory stock, I cannot mount the scope sufficiently far back for comfortable eye relief if I'm squared behind the rifle. I tried it on a T1, T3X, which has the same basic stock length and all that, and it did not work well for me. If you have something like an AR-15 where it's easy to position the scope further back, it will work very nicely. If you have a stock with a much shorter than standard length of pull, you can probably make it work. Also, depending on how you hold your rifle, right? So I am sort of a precision guy at heart. So the way I hold guns is, I'm very square behind the gun, right? So if you imagine the gun being here, right, I'm very square behind the gun. But I see a lot of hunters hold it a little bit more like this. Hold it like this, I relief is not an issue. Chicken wing the arm, stock is here, your eye is closer to the gun. I generally don't shoot that way. But when I was trying to do different presentations, if I stand like many old style hunters do, then the eye relief is not really an issue. Okay? So just a lot kind of depends on how you do it. But I found that on an AR-15 style rifle, it is probably, arguably, at its best. Okay. Oh, excuse me, it's been a long day. Okay, what was I? Yeah. So a scope that's short always introduces some compromises, and they're not just optical compromises, as I just pointed out. There's always, or there will be some guns on which it is just harder to mount, right? But on a straight stock gun like an AR-15 or thereabouts, it mounts very, very nicely. And if you are planning to put some sort of a clip on in front of it, then it becomes a really interesting option simply because the clip-on is going to be that much closer to you. Weight distribution is going to be better, stuff like that. As gun toting Minnesota mentioned, it's probably a pretty good idea for a braced pistol. It's probably a pretty good idea for SBR-ish gun that you've SBR'd already from one, and you need something short to preserve some rail space and stuff like that. I'm going to put it in a normal 16-inch, 6.5 Grand AR-15. That's the gun I use for hunting, for pigs and stuff. And I think that's probably a very, very good platform for this gun. That particular gun is not quite lacking rail space, but I'm going to go and experiment and see how well I can take advantage of the scope's short length. And as far as magnification range goes, 4 to 16 is a very nice general purpose mag range, especially since the scope happens to have very wide field of view, which is, see, my glasses are crooked now, that's going to bother me. So I'm somewhat nearsighted. Normally I wear contacts, and with contacts my eyes are extremely well corrected. Oh, this way, okay, which I enjoy. But toward the end of the day I often get tired, so I put my glasses on. Where was I? Yeah. So the scope has rather nicely wide field of view. 4 to 16 is a nice general purpose range for a gun you might want to use for shooting relatively far out. And 6.5 Grand, 6 arc, that kind of stuff is probably a very nice match for this gun. On high magnifications, you can reach quite far out. And on lower magnifications, you have pretty decent field of view, so it should work adequately well with thermal clip-ons. I'll play with that a little bit. Field of view of this guy is quite good. So as often happens, the specs on the GPO website are a little bit optimistic. They are claiming 9-foot field of view on 16 power, and I measured it at 8.4. So before we all go up in arms for them making a typo, and then knowing GPO, I don't think it's malicious. They, fortunately, unfortunately, let me see if I can find their website. More than once I've seen them do kind of weird things with the specs on their website, and whoever loads them up from US or Germany, I'm not sure from where, often does something odd with the specs. It's like whoever types in the specs doesn't know what they mean, maybe, or just a typo. That having been said, The apparent field of view of this guy I had it calculated is still, for most of this mag range, at right around 25 and a half degrees apparent FOV, which is very wide, right? So the only scopes clearly wider than that would be the new Colors for a lot more money, and the March wide angle IP scopes at 25, 26 degrees apparent field of view. Everything else that I've seen is slightly narrower than that. Scopes like the new Light Optics Works ones at 23, 24 degrees apparent field of view, like Burris Xterra Pro is. But this guy is very short and has a very wide field of view, which is quite impressive. It is difficult. One of the things that often suffers with very short designs is field of view, and this scope does that quite nicely. So Mr. Gunton to Minnesota and goes, so just sending out a bolt pistol for me. Next year. I'll be bracing it, and this seems like it could be a good option. I think so. Very likely. I think GPO is going to be a chat show. If you manage to go get out there and go walk around a little bit, go check out the scope. It's actually, I mean, everything involves a compromise and all that, but I gotta say that that is a pretty nice design. So there's no question that it is done rather well. Now there are always compromises, right? So the eye relief on the website is listed as 3.75 inches, and on full power it is on 9. This fucking crooked glasses are just bothering me. On 9, it is more like 3 inches, maybe 2.9. Again, this is not unusual. It's just I don't like the way they listed it. Just fine. What was I? Yeah, field of view is very good. There is a very slight tiny amount of tunneling on full power, but really not at all. So, Mr. Conback, this the reticle is as clean as it looks in the pictures on the website. Thankfully, they've got the wrong reticle on the website. That was the reticle in a prototype I saw at SHOT Show. Using that reticle in this scope is functionally retarded, which I pointed out to them using more or less the same terminology, except probably maybe a little more colorful. And thankfully, they went and changed it. The reticle they show on the website is fully skeletonized, which is truly stupid because on full power it completely disappears. Here is I took a couple of snapshots of the reticle through the scope without working on it too hard, right? And taking pictures through a scope with a cell phone is a little bit difficult because you need to control focus. And with a cell phone, it's a little bit difficult. Normally, I use a camera with a manual focus. But here is what that looks like. So this is what the reticle looks like on 16 power. The center is what is the same as what it looks like on the website. But the original reticle, they had skeletonized the stick bars. I politely suggested that they fill this in. I was not the only one, and somewhat unusually for an optics company, they actually listened, which I appreciated and did it. The reticle essentially is kind of like the P4 reticle from Schmidt, a fairly classic design. There's the illuminated cross in the center that's 1 by 1 milliradian wide. Okay, and then there is full milliradian step, not 1 by 1. So it's 1.6, 1.8. What was it? 1.6, I think. I don't remember exact specifics. But the thin lines start 1 milliradian away from center. And then there are full milliradian and half milliradian hash marks going out for a little bit. Out to, what is it, 5, I think? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 milliradian away from center. The thick bars on the left and the right and on the top start. And that is a very, very nice setup, honestly, for kind of a general purpose scope where you wanted a fairly clean reticle. You are going to dial elevation, hold wind, or dial both. and you maintain reasonable reticle visibility. It does obviously get thin on low power, so that was 16. This is, I think, 12. This is 8. And this is 4 and 4. It does get thin. It looks basically like a thin duplex-ish reticle, but the thick bars do help you draw the eye to the center. The way the lighting conditions were and the way the focus worked, you do not see the illuminated cross in the center all that much, but it was actually relatively nicely visible to a human eye. And if the light starts getting lower, which is more or less when you go down to full power, the illumination is done very well. The illumination control has very nice dynamic range. It's not super day bright, but it's visible against dark targets, and you can dial it down to a very low illumination level for low light use. So overall, I'm relatively happy with how the reticle worked out. The only thing, if I was doing this, the only thing that I might have considered doing differently is that if you are dialing elevation holding for wind, I don't have an easy 0.5 milliradian hold because the illuminated cross, I think it's 1.6 milliradian wide. So it means you have a 0.8 milliradian hold, but you don't have a 0.5. That is kind of, honestly, it's a little bit silly. And it is, whoever did this wasn't thinking that, one of the most common holds is half a milliradian. But to be fair, I have the 0.8, half of that is 0.4, which for a lot of things is probably close enough. It's not a PRS scope. Aside from the reticle is very, very easy to use. If I have a huge amount of mileage with P4 and P4FL reticles from Schmidt and Bender, which are very, very similar conceptually. So this reticle for me was, kind of like coming home, sort of. In other words, I think the reticle is a good match for the scope. Would it make sense to put in some sort of a moderate 3 reticle in there as well? Yeah, I think so. But what they have now is perfect functional. If the scope does well, they can always pop in a 3 reticle. They have one in there 4.5 to 27 design. Yep. Mr. Gunto to Minnesotan. I jumped in late. Did you say it has a 0 stop? Which method? I actually didn't say anything about it. I haven't said a word about turrets. I'm just getting to that. So the turrets are pop-up locking turrets, and the elevation turret does have 0 stop. For reasons I don't fully understand, there is more windage adjustment than elevation adjustment, which is kind of strange, I think. Let me see. I should have a picture of the reticle of the turret somewhere here. There you go. Right. So it's a elevation turret is a 2-turn turret, 10 milliradian per turn. They're saying total elevation adjustment is 22 milliradian. Total windage adjustment is 30 something milliradian, which is kind of backwards. Although other companies usually try to keep windage adjustment at a more moderate range and maximize elevation adjustment. Why they did it this way, I have no fucking idea. But on the other hand, I'm not going to be using this for ALR rimfire, and that is, as long as I get, honestly, for anything I'd use this scope for, as long as I get one full functioning turn, I'll be fine. Interestingly, the way setting this scope up on this rifle worked out, notice that there is a elevation counter here. I'm well into the second turn, right? So this was just to get it zeroed, I ended up dialing in 16 milliradian from one side. So I am not super far away from the edge of the adjustment range. And with all of the different rifle scopes, as you get close to the edge of the adjustment range, you start having some optical issues of varying intensity. And I've ended up spending quite a lot of time spinning turrets with this guy and trying to see how quickly you start picking image quality starts getting clearly worse. And here, I mean, here I'm about 4 milliradian away from the edge, and it's already worse, but it is very, very functional. You do start picking up significantly more chromatic aberration. That's relatively common. When I get back, when I remount this on a Grendel, I'm gonna get my hands on Burris's signature rings or use some sort of a slope mount, something like that. I'm going to adjust the um, I'm going to adjust the mounting so that I'm closer to the sweet spot where I am zeroed. When you're at the sweet spot, the image quality was quite impressive. Again, it's not going to rival a tangent theta. It's not going to be as good as high quality scope that's longer, built to the same standard. But it is better than I thought it would be, given how short this fucker is. It was, pretty impressive. Mr. Kornbacher, I think I might like that. I'd really hoped for the reticle on the full-length version's webpage, but this might work. I'm not sure what the reticle on a full-length version is. I did not look at that one. Because once it is full-length, and I didn't care too much. Oh, there you go. There's a longer one. The longer one is... so the longer one is an MOA scope, and I think it's second focal plane, but let me double check. Interestingly, on the longer one, that's 4.5 inches longer, they are listing the field of view that is probably accurate for both longer and shorter versions. And I am not seeing whether it's second focal plane or front focal plane scope, and I don't remember looking at it when I was at shot. I think this is a second focal plane design, right? Yeah, this was second focal plane. So the full length one is a second focal plane design. This thing is a front focal plane, which makes it more difficult to build. So aside from being very, very short, it's also front focal plane. All of this makes it harder to build. And again, if you are looking for something that's going to rival your tangent theta scope, except in under 10-inch length and for $600, this is not it. But I've seen a lot of scopes of varying designs and packages, and this one optically performs better than I expected. There is some lateral chromatic aberration, not as much in the sweet spot. Once you dial closer to the edge, you're picking up a bit more, but it is quite manageable. Once you get past about 14 power, there is a little between 14 and 16. There is a little bit of image quality deterioration. Again, it is so it is something. It's a good way of saying this. It is more than I expected in terms of optical performance, but not as good as somebody else who saw it was telling spinning stories how fucking amazing it is and all that sort of stuff. It is impressive. It is quite good. You pick up chromatic aberrations, especially toward the edges of the image, but it's still good, right? I did not have any issues aiming, hitting the target. Above 14 power, you have some deterioration, and it gets exacerbated toward the edges of the adjustment range. But other than that, it is quite good. Where do I see this fitting the best? Honestly, what the biggest advantage of ultra short scopes is balance, and the fact that you can put a clip on in front of it that's not too far away from you. Everything is easier to reach, not as much weight out front, etc. I think that is a primary driver for having such a short scope. Remember, it's difficult to do short scopes. What does it um, what does it mean for its potential use on other rifle types? For me, the way I'm built and with the relatively long stocks most of my rifles have, I think it's more at home on an AR-15. There is a relatively limited amount of mounting space. So I did some measurements, roughly at how long of a mount I could conceivably use here. And basically, from where the eyepiece belt ends to where the objective belt starts is just over 4.2 inches, maybe 4.25, 4.3, something like that. So if you have a single piece mount where the outrages of the rings are 4.2 inches in or less, you can comfortably mount on a single piece mount. But given how short and compact it is, honestly, I just would use split rings and be done with it. Normally, split rings can be a little bit lighter. In the case of the ones you see here, that's not the case since these are steel rings. Not sure where I have them. They're like tally, normally AR height rings, which are like 10 ounces or something. But the height and the setup turned out to be quite reasonable. Okay. So let's see what else can I tell you. As I mentioned, the turret's lock. The click feel is quite good. Like not like on all the pop-up turrets, there's a very slight amount of slop in the clicks, but it is relatively minimal. So that did not give me any trouble. Overall, I like from a functional standpoint. This is a nice scope. It comes with. I should have a good picture of it. Hold on. It comes with the installed cattail, so you can move it fairly quickly. That's another thing that, in my opinion, made it a little bit less adaptable to bolt action guns. If you look here, so here's a picture when I was screwing around with it on my Tika. Notice there's a cattail here. Right now it's sitting on about 8 power, which is roughly in the middle of the magnification range, right? Notice where the bolt handle is. This is the Anarchy Outdoors aftermarket bolt handle for Tika T3X, but it's completely changes how you cycle. The gun, nice handle. I'll need to talk about that a little bit more later. So when I put the scope on 4 power, and if I'm going to be shooting something relatively quick or not, it's going to be on a 4 power. See where the cattail is and where the bolt handle is as I lift it up. And this one is a little further back, so it doesn't interfere as much as a stock Tika bolt handle. But if you try to run it fast, you're going to scrape up your thumb on on the cattail. When the scope is on 16 power, cattail is another side of the scope at the 9 o'clock position. But when you're on 4 power, it is at the 3 o'clock position, which is a little bit off, in my opinion. A little bit too close for comfort to the bolt handle. How does this compare to, say, US Optics TS12? Well, that was a 3 to 12 by 44, and that one is not illuminated. So this is a better scope, also more expensive scope. The reticle on this one is slightly more visible at low power, which I appreciate, but it goes to 4, not to 3. And the apparent field of view on this guy is quite a bit wider than on the US Optics TS12. Overall, I think this is a better, more modern, and a more expensive design than the small US Optics scope. But again, the technology always marches forward. With the little US Optics scope, I've been kind of always said that I want that scope roughly with this package, front focal plane, but I want it illuminated. And GPO basically gave me that. So once again, there are some compromises due to it being very short, but I see very nice application for it. So we'll see. WSMC, do you think March makes good scopes? Are they worth the price? March makes very, very nice scopes. They march, pun intended, a little bit to the beat of their own drum. But for the applications where their configurations are Appropriate March scopes do very well. In just full disclosure, I used to consult quite a bit for March, design a couple of reticles for them. I have 4 March scopes, I think. I have a 5 to 42, 1.5 to 15 by 42 dual focal plane, 5 to 42 by 56 front focal plane, and the 1 to 8 by 24 shorty front focal plane. And I like them. They're good scopes. They're absolutely alpha level scopes, but they do their thing a little bit different. They come out of the paper shooting world. I just did a video on a March Majesta 8 to 80, which, as far as second focal plane scopes go, works very, very well. Yeah. Going back to the GPO, so I'm just kind of going through my mental checklist of the things I've already looked at, and I think I more or less covered the bulk of it. One of the things that always gets compromised with very short scopes is depth of field, and it's not super deep, but the depth of field is better than I anticipated. The scope does come with a side focus, and it focuses down to, gosh, what does it focus down to? About 10 yards, 12 yards, something like that. So you can comfortably use it on air guns and stuff you need for a very short distances. Again, as long as the mounting length is not an issue. It's actually another interesting application for it. I might pop it on my FX Dreamline. I have a very, very accurate PCP air gun that might be another good scope to potentially try it on. I haven't. So far, basically, I've tried it on a Tika T3X bolt gun, on a very modified 1022, and on a 224 Valkyrie ER15. And in terms of how it's set up and all that, I think I liked it on the ER15 the most. Wolford went and pulled up TS12. It says it's only $20 less. So that's the least price. But for quite a long time, I kept on seeing it around for $300-$350. So I used to have a TS12. I wonder what I did with it. Should still be there somewhere. If they are comparably priced, I think the new GPO is a better scope. So GPO in the new Centuri line does have an ultra short 3 to 12 as well, if I remember correctly. Yes, they do. But I think that's also a second focal plane design, though not a front focal plane like the 4 to 16. Let me look it up. Yeah, that one's also second focal plane and MOA turrets and all that. Honestly, if I was looking for an ultra short scope, and if this 4 to 16 was a 3 to 12, I probably would have been even happier, because 3 power on a 3x on low magnification would work even better with clip-ons. But even as is, I'm pretty happy with how the configuration overall worked out. All right, I've been talking for a solid 40 minutes, so I'm gonna drink my tea. I think that more or less covers what I've looked at with this GPO scope so far. I've have not looked at it at night. I've looked at it at some conditions with fairly significant flare, and flare control was pretty good, again, which is difficult to do in a short scope, but does it without any real issues. What else? Next thing I'm going to do with it is going to be low light, and I am going to check the turret tracking carefully. One of the reasons I usually wait a little bit before I do a careful turret evaluation, I want the turrets to break in a little bit. Sometimes there are some machining marks, something. If you just cycle them a little bit, all of that gets grooved in and saves me some trouble if I do the turret testing after that. Mr. Gun-toting Minnesotan is logging off. Have a great night. Thanks for the information. Yeah, absolutely, anytime. Wolford, this will be a top contender for downscaling from my 3 to 18 MPO on an 18-inch 56. It is an interesting option, I have to admit. So now, as far as pure optical quality, the MPO you have is a better scope, right? Mechanically, possibly as well. Definitely has more adjustment range. It's better optical, etc. The MPO is probably 4 inches longer, right? If you have an application where compact size is a significant advantage, I think this is a very good option, right? Of all the ultra short scopes of this type that I've seen anywhere near this price range, I think this is the best one I've seen yet, with a few compromises. I mean, they're still there, but they're less severe than in years past. So again, me being a cynical old jackass that I am, I don't want to do a, I would want to do a wholesale endorsement, not until I've done a full review, meaning really spent time with it, really tested everything. But so far, it's outperforming my expectations. Granted, my expectations were not terribly high. Mr. Eric 166 goes short is better for the way I like to set up ARs. Like a little PVO, but more magnification. Correct. So I am going to pop it on a Grendel. I'm going to set it up with an offset red dot just in case and use it with thermal clip-ons, and I think it's going to make for a very nice general purpose configuration. This scope is 9.9 inches long and weighs right around 20 ounces. So as far as packaging goes, it's done very nicely. And to have this small, this short of a package, I am okay giving up on some of the optical performance, even though the compromises are not as significant as I thought they would be. So, Woolford clip-ons are in play. Yes. Since the low power, let me see something. Let me see what kind of clip-on you need to match the field of view the best. With this guy on 4 power, I had an Excel sheet where I did all these calculations. Let me go find that. The hell? Oh, that's not what I was looking for. Hold on. There we go. That's the right file. Let me see. So the apparent field of view is about 25 degrees. So the real field of view on 4-axis is going to be right around 5 degrees. If you are right around, no, not 5 degrees, a little over 6 degrees, yeah, it will match. So any clip-on with a 12 micron pixel pitch with a lens that's 35 millimeters or longer, you should get very respectable performance. Maybe you'll miss a little bit of field of view, but not much at all. I'm going to try it first with the Steiner C35 Gen 2. That's a 12 micron pixel pitch, 640 by 512 image sensor with a 35 millimeter lens. I'm going to lose a few pixels, but I'm probably going to see, I don't know, 450-ish pixels, which is enough horizontally, which is enough for aiming for my purposes. It'll work very nicely, I think. All right, over the next few weeks, I'm going to play with it a little bit. But I think this, honestly, if the one I have is representative of the rest of it, remember I only look at one, so I can't really talk too much about how consistent they are. But if the one I have is representative of the overall quality most of these have, I think this scope is likely to do quite well for GPO. Right? So that's my basic take on it. Wolford, I've seen some sweet prices on those C35 Gen 2s. Too bad no good peak mount. Yes, there is a good Picatinny mount already. It's in production right now. Should be available for sale in a month, maybe 6 weeks, something like that. I should have. a picture somewhere of what it looks like. Let me see if I can find it for you. Let me see. There we go. This is what this looks like. Let me share a different screen. Okay, this is a Steiner C35 Gen 2 in an aftermarket Picatinny mount on my 458 Socom in the blind looking for pigs not too long ago. Right, so that's what this thing looks like. It is in front of the size 6 scope in this picture. That was a picture through the scope of the size 6. That's a different scope. So yeah, I think the Picatinny mount issue has been resolved. Took a little bit of out of the box thinking, but it should work with scopes up to about 50 millimeter ballpark objective. But I'm gonna try it with this same exact. There we go. I'm gonna try it with this same exact. Here's a photo. Sorry, I'm gonna try it with the same exact GPO scope, so you'll be able to see what it all looks like. So that's what the mount looks like. Yeah, that was me checking the length of this thing. Because of how they designed the thermal, you couldn't quite squeeze a Picatinny mount underneath it. So we had to cantilever it back slightly, make a nice clamp that holds it well. And we've tested this on a 458 Socom, it's been tested in the R10s, and nothing shifted, everything holds. So, it seems to work quite nicely. Hmm. Awesome. Is that coming from Steiner? No, it's coming from me. I saw that thing at SHOT Show and I thought that was silly and we'll need to make a Picatinny mount. So Steiner will may or may not bundle it with their scopes. They are all for me doing this. A friend of mine is a mechanical engineer. I had an idea how to do it. He did the mechanical design, and then I talked to Don from Annex Defense to see if he can manufacture it. It's probably going to come out through Annex Defense, since I'm not really set up to be selling hardware, and I don't really want to. But I really like the clip-on, and I wanted to have a good Picatinny mount for it. And so we kind of got together and did it. As soon as they had some clip-ons, I got my hands on one, and this is one of the first 5 prototypes that were made that I was using to ring this thing out and make sure everything works properly, etc. And the first production run of a good number of these is at the machine shop right now, going through the paces. So that's a story on the Steiner mount. Technically, I was going to do another live stream on that when I got the full production mount with the full production mount with all the appropriate, Annex Defense logos and all that sort of stuff, but I don't have that yet. Yeah, because I love the form factor and 35 millimeter lens with dual 18650s. It's a nice clip-on that has good image quality, and that amount of performance for $3,000 is significant. The mount is going to add a little bit to it, but not too much. We're not going to charge too much for it. This mount is not QD. We wanted to make the clamp as low profile as possible so that we'd be able to squeeze it underneath a fairly large objective rifle scopes. And QDs all take a little bit more space. If there is interest, we'll make a QD version, but for now, this is just gonna be, you'd need a tool to pop it on and off. Just 2 cross screws with, I think, T20 is the wrench you'll need. All right. What else you got, guys? My original plan for this was to do about an hour and then go to sleep. We are at about 50 minutes. It's 11:40 here in Texas. So I'd like to be snoring in about 20 minutes. So let's do maybe 10 minutes more if there are questions, and if not, I'll bid you good night and go to sleep. What else you got? I could have sworn I had a better picture with the mount, but that was pretty good anyway. That's right. Mr. Aircon66, I'm out. Thanks. Absolutely. Anytime. I still owe you a video on some positional stuff and how to shoot off of bags and all that. I did not forget. What I'm thinking, I'm going to take a couple of weeks off starting around Christmas. I'll do a lot of practicing for the General Hunter. And maybe I'm going to do something with some general guidelines on how to set up off of the bags. Not that I have that much of an authority on it, but since I'm practicing, might as well. Excuse me. All right. If there are no more questions, and it sounds like we are all out. Wolford, thanks for the coverage, man, and heads up on the Steiner mount. That might seal the deal for me. If you decide to buy one, use my links. It's all the same to you, but helps me a little bit. You guys have a good night. Have a good evening. I am gonna head home tomorrow. Next week is a short week for me. One of my many sins, I play table tennis. I'll go figure. So US Open is next week. My kids are wrapping up with the finals. I'll grab my kids and go play in the tournament. Then do have a mini vacation, and I'll be back home around Christmas. While on vacation out there, I'm gonna go to southern Utah, St. George. I would like to visit Voodoo Rifle Works. They have what I think, just from what I've seen, are probably the finest precision 22s on the market. I have the 17 HMR, which is an absolute hammer, and I'm kind of looking forward to eventually picking up a 22 maybe next year. But I wanted to go visit them. I don't think they will allow me any photography, videography at the factory, but if there is something they will let me photograph, I'll post the pictures. You'll see them. That will be on my website. For those of you who are not on my locals website, darklordofoptics.com is the best way to get a hold of me. Thank you all, and good night.